Did you ever think about the chemical composition of the human body? What is the human body made up of? And what are the different elements that are there that help us do the activities in our everyday lives? So, all the human beings are made up of four important elements, starting with carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. So, these are the four important elements that are present in the human body. So, these four elements basically unite in different proportions to form very important molecules for the human body. Water, whose molecular formula is H2O, is the most abundant molecule that is present in the human body. As we see, water is made up of two atoms of hydrogen plus one atom of oxygen. So this is the atomic composition of water. Water accounts for nearly 60 to 70% of the total body mass. However, this number is highly variable and it can vary from individuals to individuals, but in all the organisms, water is the most abundant molecule. Next, we have the lipids. So, lipids account for nearly 14 to 16% of the total body mass. So, lipids are an extremely diverse group and include fats, oils, phospholipids, etc. So lipids are also made up of three important elements, namely carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. So these are the three different elements that make up all the lipid species. Moving on, we have the proteins, which are the most diverse biomolecules. So proteins also account for about 15% of the total body mass in human beings. Now, proteins are made up of the elements carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and they also contain some amounts of sulfur. Next, we have the carbohydrates. Carbohydrates only account for about 1% of the total body mass. Carbohydrates are also made up of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen in a fixed ratio. So, we have two atoms of hydrogen for every atom of carbon and oxygen. So this is the general formula for a carbohydrate. So carbohydrates include simple sugars like glucose or complex sugars like starch and glycogen. Next we have the nucleic acids. Nucleic acids account for only less than 1% of the total body mass. Nucleic acids include DNA and RNA that carry the genetic information in the cells of the human body. Nucleic acids are made up of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and phosphorus. So phosphorus is a very important element that is required to produce nucleic acids. Apart from these, the human body also contains some amounts of other mineral ions such as calcium, sodium, potassium, chlorine. So these are some of the important elements other than the four that we have discussed that are important for the functioning of the human body. Apart from this, it also contains phosphate, phosphorus. Like we discussed, phosphorus is there in nucleic acids, but phosphorus is also an important component of ATP, which is the energy currency of the cell. So all these elements plus some minor elements account for nearly 6% of the total body mass. The major important elements are calcium and phosphorus because they are important and they are also present in the bones. It's important to note that the numbers given here vary from individual to individual. So among all these, lipids, proteins, carbohydrates, and nucleic acids are together considered as biomolecules or organic molecules. So let us discuss in brief about the functions of these biomolecules in the human body. Lipids, carbohydrates, proteins, and nucleic acids are the four most important biomolecules. So they are absolutely essential for a lot of biological activities that take place every day. So biomolecules are basically organic molecules that are produced by the human beings. Of these four, carbohydrates, proteins, and nucleic acids are also considered as macromolecules or polymers. Except lipids, all the other three biomolecules are also considered macromolecules as they are made up of repeating units called monomers. So mono is single, whereas mer refers to a repeating unit. So macromolecules are all made up of small repeating units called monomers. There isn't a single monomer that can form a lipid. So technically, lipids are not included under macromolecules, but they are biomolecules. So in all the three cases, the monomers combine together to form a very large molecule, which is called a polymer. So many units of monomer, when combined together, form something called a polymer. And this process takes place through the loss of a water molecule. So when two monomers combine, there is a loss of water molecule. And this process is called polymerization. So as we discussed, carbohydrates, proteins, and nucleic acids are made up of repeating units called monomers. So the monomer or a building block for a carbohydrate is monosaccharide. So many monosaccharides combine together to form a polymer or a macromolecule called carbohydrate. Similarly, amino acids are the building blocks or monomers for proteins. And nucleotides are the building blocks of nucleic acids that include RNA and DNA. So a monomer can also be considered as the building block because it is the monomers that need to combine to form the macromolecules. And please remember, lipids are biomolecules but are not included under the category of macromolecules. Let us study the key properties of each of these biomolecules. So let's start with the first biomolecule, which is carbohydrates. So carbohydrates are made up of the elements carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen in a 1:2:1 ratio. So we have 2 atoms of hydrogen for every atom of carbon and oxygen. So carbohydrates are abundant in a lot of foods that we consume, in rice, bread, and a couple of fruits. So the building block of a carbohydrate is a monosaccharide, or in short, it is also called as sugar. So some important examples of carbohydrates include glucose, which is a simple sugar. So glucose is a 6-carbon molecule and it is designated 6C, where C refers to the total number of carbons. So glucose is the most important monosaccharide because glucose can be broken down to release energy in a process called aerobic cellular respiration. So this energy is nothing but adenosine triphosphate or ATP. So this ATP helps to carry out a lot of functions in the human body. Then we have starch and glycogen. So starch and glycogen are commonly called as complex sugars. So they are basically polymers because they are made up of many molecules of glucose. So glucose is the monosaccharide or the sugar that helps to form starch and glycogen. So they are considered as complex sugars. So starch is present in plants, whereas glycogen is present in animals. So they help as storage forms of glucose. So starch is the glucose reserve in plants, whereas glycogen is the glucose reserve in animals. Carbohydrates like cellulose is present in the cell walls of the plant. The cell walls of plants and fungi are also made up of carbohydrates. The cell wall is important because it provides structural support. It helps to maintain the shape of the cells, and it also protects the plant cells from any foreign pathogens like bacteria or viruses. So the cell walls in plants as well as fungi are also made up of carbohydrates. Cellulose is present in plants, whereas chitin is present in fungi. So both chitin and cellulose are also carbohydrates, or we can call them as complex sugars. So next we have the lipids. So lipids are also made up of the elements carbon, hydrogen and oxygen. However, they contain very less oxygen when compared to carbohydrates. So lipids are mostly made up of the elements carbon and hydrogen. Now lipids have two important characteristics that separates them from the rest of the biomolecules. First one, the lipids are usually hydrophobic. So hydro refers to water and phobia is fear. So lipids usually don't interact with water. So that's why they are called hydrophobic. Most of the lipid classes are hydrophobic, or in some cases they may contain a hydrophobic component that does not interact with water. Instead, lipids are soluble in organic solvents like chloroform or hexane. So these are some of the organic solvents in which lipids can dissolve, but they do not dissolve in water. Second one, as we discussed earlier, lipids are not polymers because they are not made up of a single repeating unit. And lipids are extremely diverse molecules. So let's look at some key functions of lipids. So lipids are important as long-term energy reserves in the human body. So carbohydrates are mostly important for rapid energy production, whereas lipids help the body with long-term energy reserves. So when we don't consume food for a couple of days, it is basically the lipids that are helping us with the energy production or with the energy reserves. Second one, lipids are a very important component of the cell membrane. The cell membrane or a plasma membrane is a outer boundary that separates the cell components from the external environment. The cell membrane is predominantly made up of phospholipids and cholesterol. So lipids are very important for the formation and functioning of the cell membrane. Most of the hormones that are present in the human body are made up of lipids. So hormones are chemical messengers produced by glands that function at a specific target organ. So most of the hormones, for example, testosterone produced by the testes is important in males, while estrogen is a female sex hormone produced by the ovaries. So they are important for the development of secondary sexual characteristics in males and females, and both these hormones are basically made up of lipids. So some key examples of lipids include fats, oils, cholesterol, phospholipids. So fats are basically solid at room temperature, while oils are liquids at room temperature. So fats and oils are important classes of lipids. Then we have cholesterol. So the hormones that we discussed here are basically derivatives of cholesterol, and cholesterol is a key lipid molecule. Phospholipids are also present in the cell membrane along with cholesterol, and they are important for the functioning and maintaining the cell membrane. So the third class of biomolecules are proteins. So proteins nearly make up 14 to 16% of the total body mass. So proteins are made up of the elements carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and also contain some amounts of sulfur. The building blocks of proteins are called amino acids. amino acids are the building blocks of proteins. So amino acids are held together by covalent bonds to form a polypeptide chain. So these are individual amino acids that are joined by covalent bonds to form a polypeptide chain that folds into a complex three-dimensional structure. So every protein that we see is basically having a unique three-dimensional structure, and this structure is important for the functioning of the protein. Proteins are the most versatile biomolecules as they carry out a lot of functions in the human body. Let us study some of the key functions. So first, let us start with enzymes. So all the enzymes that are there in the human body are basically proteins. Enzymes help to catalyze biochemical reactions in the human body. So they are commonly known as biocatalysts because they help accelerate the rate of chemical reactions. So enzymes are basically protein molecules. So some important enzymes include amylase. So amylase is a key digestive enzyme as it helps to break down the carbohydrate starch into maltose. Amylase is present in the saliva and it is also secreted by the pancreas. So amylase is a digestive enzyme that helps to break down starch into maltose, and maltose is further broken down into glucose by another enzyme called maltase. Maltase is also a key digestive enzyme. Next, we have proteases. So these are a class of enzymes. They include trypsin and pepsin. So proteases are enzymes that help to break down proteins into polypeptides and further into amino acids. So the proteins that we take in the food are actually broken down through the action of proteases. Then we have another enzyme called ATP synthase. So this is located in the mitochondria and it has a key role in the production of ATP. So another important enzyme in the human body is thrombin. So thrombin has an important role in the blood clotting. One final example is DNA polymerase. So DNA polymerase is an enzyme that helps in the synthesis of new DNA. So these are some of the key enzymes that are there in the human body. And remember, all the enzymes are basically proteins. Next function is transport. So we have some important proteins in the human body that play a key role in transport. The most important example is hemoglobin. So hemoglobin is a transport protein that helps to transport oxygen in the blood. So oxygen is important for aerobic cellular respiration in the synthesis of ATP. And oxygen is transported in the blood through hemoglobin, which is commonly called as a transport protein. So another important example is albumin. Albumin is also a transport protein that predominantly helps to transport fatty acids or other water insoluble molecules. We also have some transport proteins in the cell membrane. These are called membrane proteins because they are located on the cell membrane. So these transport proteins help to transport water and glucose across the cell membrane. So transport of water and glucose requires special proteins which are called transport proteins, and they are also located in the cell membrane. These are some of the examples of transport proteins. So hemoglobin and albumin are basically proteins. Hormones, as we discussed earlier, are important signaling molecules that are produced by glands and have important functions at target organs. So some of the hormones present in the human body are lipids, while some hormones are made up of proteins or polypeptide chains. So important examples of protein hormones include insulin and glucagon. So both these hormones are produced by the pancreas and they help to monitor or regulate the blood glucose levels. So insulin and glucagon are basically proteins that function as hormones. So another example could be growth hormone produced by the pituitary gland. So growth hormone plays an important role in the growth or increase in the overall size of the human body. Growth hormone is also a protein. We have many other examples of hormones that are actually proteins. These are some of the important ones. Another important class of proteins is antibodies. Antibodies are also known as immunoglobulins. So antibodies are basically Y-shaped molecules. They are called protective proteins. They are protective in nature because they are produced by our immune system and they help to identify and kill the foreign pathogens that enter the human body. So these foreign particles are usually known as antigens. So to neutralize the antigens or the foreign particles, the body will produce a special class of proteins called antibodies. So they are important in the natural defense of the human body. Besides these functions, some classes of proteins provide structural support to the cell. So there is cytoskeleton located within the cells that helps to maintain the shape of the cells. So here we have some important proteins called actin and myosin, which helps to control the shape of the cells. So these are examples of proteins that help with maintaining the structure. So these are only some of the functions of proteins, but in reality they do have many more functions. Proteins are fundamental to most of the cellular activities in the cells of the body, and that's why they're usually regarded as the building blocks of life. So the last important class of biomolecules are nucleic acids. So nucleic acids are made up of the elements carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, and phosphorus. Phosphorus is very important for the formation of nucleic acids. As the name indicates, these are acidic molecules that are located in the nucleus. So acids refer to their acidic nature and nuclei refers to the location. So nucleic acids are acidic molecules that are located in the nucleus. The two important nucleic acids are DNA and RNA. So DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid, whereas RNA stands for ribonucleic acid. So the nucleic acids are important for the storage and expression of genetic information in the cells. So the most important difference between DNA and RNA lies in the type of the sugar that they contain. RNA is designated ribonucleic acid, whereas DNA is deoxyribonucleic acid. So this refers to the type of the sugar that is present in the molecule. So DNA contains deoxyribose sugar, whereas RNA contains ribose sugar. So nucleic acids are also macromolecules or polymers, as they are made up of many repeating units called monomers. So the monomer for a nucleic acid is called a nucleotide. So nucleotide or nucleotides can be considered as the building molecules of nucleic acids. All the nucleotides contain three important components, starting with the sugar. The sugar is a 5-carbon molecule present in nucleic acids. So it can be ribose or deoxyribose. Ribose is the sugar that is present in RNA, while deoxyribose is the sugar present in DNA. Then we have the nitrogen containing base. Nitrogen containing bases fall in two different categories. First is purines and the other one is pyrimidines. So each nucleotide will either have a purine or a pyrimidine, which is a nitrogen containing base. Finally, we have the phosphate group. Phosphate groups are negatively charged, or they carry a negative charge because they have lost hydrogens. And thereby they carry a negative charge. So due to the presence of phosphate, even the DNA and RNA overall contains a negative charge. Nucleic acids are always negatively charged at physiological pH. So another important distinction, DNA is double-stranded, whereas RNA is a single-stranded molecule. So if you see the basic structure of DNA, it is made up of two chains that run parallel to one another. A, T, G and C, which is written here, are the nitrogenous bases that we discussed in the earlier slide. So each chain is made up of multiple nitrogen bases that are hydrogen bonded to the bases on the other chain. So these lines that you see here are the hydrogen bonds. So the hydrogen bonds will help to hold the two chains together. This is the chain 1 and this is the chain 2. So both these chains are held together via hydrogen bonds that form between the nitrogenous bases. That's why DNA is a double-stranded molecule, or it is made up of two strands that are held together. So RNA is just made up of a single strand. It is single-stranded. So the major function of nucleic acids is to store and transmit the genetic information from parents to the offspring or to the daughter cells. So the major function of DNA in the cells is to synthesize proteins. The DNA present in the cells contains all the instructions necessary to produce the proteins in the human body. And as we know, proteins are the major biomolecules that perform a lot of functions in the human body. So whenever required, the DNA will produce proteins according to the necessity of the cell. Although human beings contain DNA as the major genetic information, we do have some viruses that actually contain RNA as the major carrier of genetic information instead of DNA. So the earliest organisms usually had RNA, while the most advanced multicellular organisms store the information in the form of DNA. This is a very basic introduction to the 4 different classes of biomolecules that are found in the living cells. So you will be studying in detail about each of these classes in the upcoming videos. If you have found this video helpful, please like it and do share it with your friends.